Good evening. This is a build for a Kinetic Rain Elementalist Warner for the 3.27 league start. As you can see from the footage, this new skill looks really satisfying. This league introduces new mechanics like light radius stacking or boosted herald effects that can give this build all the flat damage it needs early game. Combine that with golems, optional ES tech, overleach tech, ailment immunity, hybrid life ES, capped spell suppression and good shock and chill effect, and you got yourself a very solid league starter. Sadly, we don't have all the numbers yet, so this is not a complete build guide. We also don't know all the mechanics, so just be aware that this is just an idea, right? A concept. Do not play this if you want a guaranteed easy league start. But this skill just looks really fucking cool and I'm 100% gonna try it out. In this video I got a progression guide and a full POB that I'll go through, where I'll explain everything that you need to know for your first week. Do know that if the skill turns out to be dog shit, it'll be very easy to transition to another very strong league start build, because we're playing Elementalist, and that just might be the strongest and most flexible all-round ascendancy. Okay, so with that out of the way, let's look at Kinetic Rain and what we do know from the reveal. Right, so here we have the gem info on POE. Now, as you can see up here above, the tags are attack, AoE, projectile, duration, and trigger. So these are ways to scale the damage and the mechanics of the skill. Now, what it actually does is basically randomly in sort of like a box, right, from like between 9 and 4.5 meters, it shoots down projectiles, and they have an initial damage, and then they leave behind an anomaly, and that also does a bunch of damage. Now, Ziggedy already mentioned it, that they changed the damage for this a little bit, so it's going to be less damage on the initial projectile, and a little bit, well, at least more on the kinetic anomaly. So we'll have to see what the actual numbers are going to be. But even if it's nerfed a little bit, I think the potential is very good. Because if we just take these numbers, right, just very conservative, right, 143 plus 162 times the attack speed, right, then per projectile we get a damage effectiveness, of about 335, right? And that's for one projectile. So even if like 2 or 3 hit, that's already very good in terms of damage effectiveness, right? And mechanically, the way it looks, right, is I took a screenshot here, right? So what you see here is sort of the box, right? This is the box that you cast, and then these projectiles, they randomly rain down. I think they also probably at least auto target a little bit. And imagine, right, if you have a little big boss here, right? It's going to be hit by a bunch of different projectiles, especially if it has a very large hitbox. So we'll see how good this is, but it might possibly be very OP. And regardless of that, the skill just looks really fucking cool. So yeah, I think this has great potential, right? Anything else? Yeah, so this is a level 20 gem with 20 qualities, so some things might change for, initially when you're leveling, right? Might not fire 13 projectiles. Probably not, right? Maybe like 6 or 7 or so. And then quality might add something. And then once you level it, I guess maybe a projectile here and there. And also the question is how does the area of effect scaling work, right? Sometimes with these kind of skills, actually less area is better in terms of shotgunning, for example, a boss. Because the thing is, you can increase the area for this, right? And the idea as well, then the explosion radius will go up, but also the base targeting area will also increase. So everything scales. So the question is, we've got to figure out how this actually works, right? How can we scale this properly? And also there's a maximum of 30 anomalies, right? So once you got very high attack speed, you cannot just fucking blanket the whole map with anomalies. They're gonna sort of like disappear once you start firing more and more, but I don't think there'll be a big issue. All right, before we get to the POB, a very quick shout out to two damage tags that we've sort of discovered, and they're definitely going to be in the game. Is first of all light radius stacking. Now Palstron has made a very good video on this, on how to do this, so I'll put the link in the description. But just to quickly explain, basically we got a new reworked unique wand, the Eclipse Solaris. It's like a tier 4 or tier 5 wand, right? So we're not sure if it's going to be the same rarity. But the idea is you can stack light radius in a pretty sort of low investment way, and you get a lot of flat damage. Because, for example, you can You can dual wield these, and then you get, for every 1% light radius above your base value, you get 7 fire damage to attacks. Now that's very good, probably in the mid game, right? When you can get all the items together, right? So maybe early maps or whatever, but it's definitely something that can carry you over towards the end game. And then another one is one of the bloodlines that looks very, very good. Because once again, for one skills, you need a lot of flat damage. That's your best scaler initially. And we got here the Farewell to Flesh. Herald skills have 2% more buff effect for every 1% maximum mana they reserve. Now, Jungrown made a very good video on this, right, where he explained how to use this with some other items like the Essence Worm, on how to, reserve 88% of your maximum mana and get a shit ton of flat damage from Herald of Ice and Herald of Thunder. So once again, I'll put that video in the link in the description, but check it out. They've made a great explanation, so there's no point in me trying to repeat it, right? Alright, so here we have the full tree for about, until level 90, right? Just for you to get it in red maps, right? And just be mindful, this is a league start guide, right? It's not a full guide until level 100 with hundreds of divines of gear. This is just for your first week. Now, I've got a couple of different loadouts here, right? So, before Kinetic Rain, right, that you're going to get in Act 3, and then, for the first 5 acts, then the rest, and then when you're into maps, right? Don't really pay attention to the numbers here on the left. We don't know the skill yet, and also we don't know how to do all these damage calculations. So this is just very conservative. Now, Ascendancies first, right? So Elementalist, very flexible, very strong. You're obviously first going to take the Golem node, right? You're going to basically, when you take this in your first lap, just make sure you got this node, Golem Commander, so you can have 4 Golems, and you get another 80% buff effect. Now, this has been nerfed slightly, but in the end, I think it's, in terms of effect, maybe like, a 20% nerf, right? Maybe even less. Then the second node you're going to take in Cruel Lab is Shaper of Storms. So you get access to Shock, right? And at least 25%. This will definitely boost your damage. And then I would take Shaper of Winter as a third, right? You can also, if you want, you can take Bastion of Elements. It's a good setup for you when you get into maps, right? You immediately get a lot of elemental damage mitigation. But I prefer Shaper of Winter just so you get some chill effect, right? Just to make everything a little bit easier. There's also a tag with the Lycia Bloodline effect, where basically you get Herald of Ice and Herald of Thunder, and you stack Herald buff effect. Then you definitely want to take Bring of Ruin, because you get 67% increased effect of Herald buffs on you, which stacks multiplicatively with the Lycia Bloodline modifier. However, this is gated behind killing Lycia, and that's in the Sanctum, right? So you're probably not going to get that very soon, but you can probably buy carriage for that, right? So just keep an eye on that. Alright, so let's talk through the start, right? So let's go to the early levels, right? So obviously you start as a witch. You got a lot of nice spell damage nodes here. And the thing about wands is, first of all, they scale very well with spell damage with wand skills. They scale very well with spell damage. So this is great. And what they need is flat damage. So on all your items, I'll point it out later too, you want to get flat damage, right? Ideally on your wand, definitely on your rings, your amulet. You want to get an aura like Wrath or Anger. Heralds maybe, right? Just get a lot of flat damage. That will boost your damage most. Right, so we're going to go in this direction. And then this is the first wand cluster here. This is actually not correct. You first want to take accuracy, probably in the beginning, right? In the beginning you want to take, which node is it, right? Yeah, just take accuracy, right? You don't need power charges yet. Take this accuracy one. Then we go here. Now this is a fire mastery cluster here. You want to take this because 100% increased damage against enemies that are ignited. Now do know you need some fire damage, right? To at least ignite your enemies. So either maybe a flame spell, like a fire spell like Holy Flame Totem or Flame Wall. And also just get some flat fire damage, or for example the Anger Aura, right? And then when we go in this direction, right, this is a wand cluster, we get a very nice spike in damage. I'm gonna level with Kinetic Bolt, right, that you're gonna get, after killing Brutus. So that's already a wand, that's why I'm gonna go this way. But yeah, and then have a look at the skills, right? So Kinetic Bolt is what I'm gonna do. I just want to play with wands immediately. Gonna supplement that with Holy Flame Totem with Combustion for the Ignite, as I've explained earlier, and Elemental Proliferation. Movement skills, right? Frostblink and Flame Dash linked to Arcane Surge. A lot of people like Shield Charge. I like to get it a little bit later. I like Flame Dash in the beginning and Frostblink, but do whatever you want, right? For auras, you're gonna take Clarity as soon as you're gonna get it, and then in Act 2, Herald Thunder and Herald Vice, just for some supplemental flat damage, right? And some clear. And then you can take this later if you want, right? In Act 3, get Spell Slinger, put Flame Wall in there, just so you don't have to click Flame Wall, right? Very nice. Now let's go back to the trees, and we're gonna go to Act 5 to 10. So this is important, right? There's a lot here. Yeah, so this is for the end of the campaign, right? So basically you've taken this area, and then you're gonna go in this direction, because first you want to take these Golem Commander nodes, right? So you want to go there, do your first lap, get your Golem node Ascendancy, and then I would say you go this way, right? So you can take maybe these wand attack nodes, right? You can take this later, and then you're gonna work your way right in this direction. Also take this mana cluster, basically mainly for the mana reservation efficiency. So maybe you can fit in another low life aura, right? Or another aura, right? Maybe precision or something like that. You pick up some life and some resistances. You know, I usually like to do that so I don't die. Take this one, increase maximum life if you have no life modifiers on your body armor, right? Just to keep an eye on that. This is a shock cluster. I would take this all the way near the end, right? Don't take it immediately, because you don't have enough scaling of shock effect anyway, right? So don't worry about this. You can take this node though, right? Just don't take this mastery very early. Maybe at the beginning of maps. Then this direction, right? This right side of the cluster, or of the tree, is very efficient for a lot of damage, right? You wanna get some skills, right? And then this is a way to get frenzy charges, right? So you're gonna use, I think, Sniper's Mark, and then you get a chance to get frenzy charges against unique or rare enemies. So let's have a look at the skills, right? This is your Kinetic Rain setup, right? Ignore that, it's Kinetic Blast. And the support gems that I think are gonna be good are Elemental Damage with Attacks and Sacred Wisps, right? They'll be a 3-link, and then Trinity for your 4-link. Now for Trinity, you need to pay attention, because you need to make sure that at least, you have 2 elemental skills that can have high hits, right? Because you kind of need to stack it up. Just look in the corner of your screen, there's a Trinity buff, and see if it's active. So just make sure you have at least some damage of all 3 elements, and if at least 2 of them can get a high hit, right? You can balance this out with enchants on your gear or auras. Obviously, you want to have all the golems, right? I'm going to go for Stone, Flame, Lightning, and Ice Golem. There's probably some min-maxing here and there, but I just like to pick the golems immediately that I want for the beginning of maps. And then for auras, I like Purity of Elements. I like it a lot. I take it on every character, because you have immunity to elemental ailments, and you get a lot of elemental resistances. And so there's a lot less pressure on your gear, and you can just go for much more damage on your gear. Then you can get a DPS aura, right? Wrath is very good, but you might want to balance out the elemental damage on your skills, because, for example, who knows, you got a lot of lightning, right? And you may want to pick anger for fire damage, right? So maybe you can level that in your offhand. I like Steel Skin a lot, just for bleed immunity and some buffer as a damage. Put it on automation. Sniper's Mark with Mark on Head, right? You can also connect Frostblink to that and Life Tap, right? Maybe not initially, but just see if you can. It doesn't hinder you when you're laughing. Shield Charge later on with faster attacks, obviously. And Sigil Power is a nice buff for bossing. And I would just keep some Vitality and Precision, right? I mean, I always pick Vitality, but once you get your Stolen Golem, you can probably just, not use that, right? Level of Precision always comes in useful for attack builds, but just, the level that works for you. Maybe in this case, because you might not have enough mana, you can reserve it on your life instead. The same for maybe low life or clarity, right? Then we're gonna go to items here. Now, this all speaks for itself, right? These are just items that I just put some modifiers on here that I think you want to keep an eye on, right? So most important thing for your wand is flat damage. And besides that, also spell damage. You're gonna get a bunch from your tree, but later on you're gonna respec, and then most of your spell damage that you're gonna have is gonna be from your main hand and your offhand, right? So that's gonna be your shield and your wand. Now, I'm definitely gonna play with a shield. You can double one if you want, but I just like the idea of having a little bit of block and defenses. It still scales well for damage because it has spell damage and get some resistance on there. I didn't list a whole lot of unique items, but the Honor Home Soldier Helmet, right? It's very, very good for leveling. And also it is involved in the tech with Lycia Bloodline, right? For scaling your heralds. So definitely keep an eye on that one if you can get a cheap one. It's very good from leveling all the way from when you can get it up until maps or even more, right? The same goes for Prism Weave, right? It's got a big bunch of flat damage, got some resistances. It's just an all-round very, very good belt for Wander specifically. So yeah, see if you can get it. But the problem is with this meta, with all these Wanders, it might be very expensive. Right, and these are just a bunch of items, right? Probably just gonna go evasion chest and then bunch of either evasion or energy shield gear. In the beginning, you can also get some armor gear for some fizz mitigation. It doesn't really matter. Just equip the best items that you have, right? Just a bunch of examples of flasks. And yeah, once you get a little bit more crit, these Surgeon's flasks, right, where you can get a flask charge whenever you deal crit, are very good just to keep your flask charges up. Then let's go to the last tree, right? Here we go, right? So we're going to go more in this direction, right? And we're going to also build some defenses, right? So in terms of the effective hit pool, that is, an indicative number. The DPS isn't, right? Because we don't have the skill. But, what I wanted to go for is a hybrid, right? With life and energy shield. And I try to cap spell suppression as much as possible, right? So we got 70% evasion from a bunch of evasion gear, and we got 99% spell suppression. That comes basically because we're probably not capped, but we're taking chance to suppress spell damage is lucky. So we're probably around 90% spell suppression. This is just conservative, right? I got a very cheap cluster here. I think it'll be quite cheap, right? Just with things like this is a wand one, right? But what I was looking for here is a medium cluster with effect of ailment, right? Because you apply shock and chill, and so what you want to do is just scale that through maybe a cheap cluster, right? Then what do we have, right? I personally like this direction. You can also go here if you want. But I personally am a fan of the right side of the tree. It's very efficient, a lot of damage nodes. Let's have a look at the skills. It's basically the same idea, right? Just have a look at it. It's the same idea as the campaign one. And then the items, right? Now, I've got all rare items here, right? There's probably some good uniques, but since it's a wand meta, some of these might be very expensive. Right, but if you want, right, keep an eye out for Prism Weave, right, and I think Honor Home, right, are very, very good in this slot, depending on what you're gonna build, right. But what you're gonna go for these type of items, these are all examples. Most of these are gonna be hybrid, right? So evasion, energy shield. I've got some notes here where I've got some information on how to craft some of these items, right. For example, in the tree, we're gonna go for a bunch of just simple Abyss jewels, right? Searching Eye jewels. You can craft these with just Reforge Attack in the Harvest Bench, and just get a bunch of decent modifiers. You can go this for very, very cheap. I also have a Stygian Vice, and I've got one jewel in there. Let me see. There it is. With corrupted blood cannot be inflicted on you. That's just something you want to keep an eye on. Obviously. When you're mapping, especially in red maps, and 6% chance to gain phasing for 4 seconds on kill. That's just very, very nice. Amethyst rings, just basically, you know, you want to get some chaos res, right? So these are just very good bases initially. Just have a look at these items. These are just examples of items that are going to be pretty decent at a league start, right? So yeah, that's really it, right? Have a look at this. I think it's going to be very solid as a league start. I'm going to be super excited to play with the new skill. If you have any questions about this, please just, you know, put something in the comments. I'm also going to put some links to other build creators, right, that have made skills, that have made builds that are, you know, not exactly like this, but they will also help you on your journey, right? So please consult them too, right? I'm here to give you the best league start possible, and so have a look at these other videos. And as long as you get the resources to have a good and fun league start, that's really all that matters. So yeah, that's it. I'll see you guys later, and bye bye.